In the flicker of dawn, mist rises over the rolling hills of Virginia. In that half-light, the land seems to breathe itself. Every tree, every furrow carries memory. The land, once empty, now carries the weight of ownership and ambition. This is where our story begins, with Colonel William Preston, a man of birth and vision, but also a man whose legacy was built upon silent suffering. William Preston was born on Christmas Day, 1729, in Limerville, Northern Ireland. His family crossed the ocean, seeking opportunity. From boyhood, he carried two burdens, hope and expectation. He studied, surveyed, negotiated land. He rose, he gained, he planted roots. In Virginia, he became a landowner, surveyor, militia officer, and politician. He built a plantation he named Smithfield. Completed by 1773, it became his home and the center of his power. Smithfield stood grand, with columns, wide porches, brick, and timber. Yet behind its walls were dark quarters and endless fields. Here slaves toiled in the sun, bending under heavy loads. Their names are forgotten. Their labor built Preston's wealth. He rose in public life. He became a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses. He signed the Fincastle resolutions. He led militia forces in frontier wars. He spoke of liberty and justice. But the liberty he spoke of was not for all. His plantation grew. His influence spread. His children would become governors and politicians, rulers of the South. The Preston dynasty was revered, but beneath its glory lay the cries from the fields. Every glory casts a shadow. Every power demands a cost. On the frontier, danger was constant. Indian raids, land disputes, and bitter winters shaped his world. Preston's name appeared on countless maps and land grants. He used his power to expand his reach, to control land, to enforce order. Every acre meant more bodies in bondage, more nights of the overseer's lash, more whispers of rebellion in the dark. The plantation was not just soil and crop, it was a machine of control, fueled by fear. We do not know the names of all who suffered under Preston. The records are silent, the letters vague. But wherever the tobacco rose stood tall, shadows lingered. In Smithfield's parlor, Preston sat with maps and ledgers. He planned, he calculated, he dreamed of legacy. He thought little of the cost. The land had promise, and he would claim it. But beneath that promise, the ground began to tremble. At night, in the cabins and fields, whispers spread. Escape, revenge, freedom. Across the colonies, talk of liberty filled the air. And among the enslaved, a question began to rise: why not us? This is the truth behind the man celebrated in history books. His greatness stood on broken backs. His legacy rooted in pain. And the soil of Smithfield would not stay silent forever. The midday sun beat down on fields of tobacco and corn, turning leaves into shadows. From a distance, Smithfield looked powerful, ordered, but in the hush between the rows, a different world breathed. Between 1774 and 1865, nearly 190 people were enslaved at Smithfield. Some worked under the open sky planting, tending livestock, doing skilled trades like carpentry. Others served inside the house cooking, cleaning, caring for the Preston family, even cradling the children when they cried. William Preston's ambition was vast. His first plantation, Greenfield, was built from land he surveyed and claimed. He purchased 16 Africans from the slave ship, True Blue, in 1759. Greenfield grew to over 1,200 acres by the 1770s. In 1773, Preston moved to Smithfield, building a grand house to serve as his seat. The fields stretched, the barns stood tall, and the order of his world ascended. But beneath that order, the world of the enslaved was hostile, hidden, and full of tension. Inside the manor, the lifeblood of Preston's household moved through hidden corridors. Enslaved workers handled intimate tasks, cleaning bedrooms, stoking fires, emptying chamber pots, carrying water, sewing garments. Even as Preston spoke of land, freedom, and power in public, his home ran on the invisible labor of those who had no rights, no voice. Each time Preston died or property was divided, enslaved families were torn apart. In 1806, 51 people belonging to his estate were distributed among heirs. In 1847, nearly 100 enslaved individuals were divided among his descendants. For them, every legal document, every inheritance dispute, every shift in power was danger. Every division meant someone unknown was sent away, never to return. At night, the plantation grew silent but for distant murmurs. In the slave cabins, faint candlelight glowed. Some whispered of escape, some whispered of vengeance, some whispered the names of lost children. The master's house stood unmoved, but shadows shifted in the dark. Preston never walked among those whispers. He built his legacy from survey lines and political power. He fought wars, signed resolutions, commanded men, but the ground he walked on was soaked in labor, in pain, in stories untold. He died in 1783, collapsing at a militia muster. Publicly, the cause was stroke or heat. Privately, the land watched and waited. The house continued, the fields continued, the fields continued, the shadow world continued in silence. In the next part, the silence becomes fracture, revolt threatens. Freedom whispers louder. and Preston's world begins to tremble. At the edge of dawn, mist hugs the ridges of frontier Virginia. Smoke from distant chimneys drifts slow. In that half-light, men prepare for war, others brace for what will break them. William Preston, now in the heart of his power, finds his ambitions stretched between two worlds, the cultivated order of plantation life and the fierce disorder of warfare on the frontier. He had already built Greenfield, the first holding that stretched over 1,200 acres by the 1770s. But as his land holdings grew, so did the threats. Native American attacks, competing claims, raids, unsettled frontiers. These forces pressed on the borders of his domains. To protect his holdings, he became more than a planter, he became a defender. When the American Revolution ignited, Preston's role sharpened. He aligned with the Patriot cause, forging committees, organizing militia. In 1775, Preston and others in Fincastle County led the formation of a county committee to respond to the Continental Congress's call. He marched between duty to his land and duty to his class. On one side, his public life, serving in the House of Burgesses, signing resolutions, leading surveys, legislating, standing among Virginia's colonial elite. On the other side, his private life. The plantations still needed overseers, enslaved laborers, order. The plantation machine could not pause for war. Preston faced an internal war between ideology and practice. He spoke of freedom from British tyranny, yet he continued to own human souls. He commanded men into battle, yet his own power rested on the silence of those he enslaved. At the same time, wars raged along the frontier, conflicts with native tribes, disputes over land, raids into the wilderness. Preston led men to defend settlements, to push back, to maintain the fragile border of Virginia. Loyalist neighbors, too, cast shadows. In the lowlands and hill country, not all were patriots. Some clung to the crown. Preston had to secure or suppress dissent at home even as he fought abroad. Inside Smithfield, the enslaved watched. They saw their master ride away to war. They heard gunfire echo in the distance. They felt the possibility of weakness in his absence. Some may have questioned, if the master leaves, will the chains loosen? Some may have listened for raiders, or plotted their own escape. The plantation seemed immovable, yet its foundations trembled. Preston's final years were filled with personal grief. In 1782, his daughter Anne died at 13. He lost children. He faced disease, stress, and the exhaustion of constant conflict. Yet he labored on, managing lands, defending borders, consolidating legacy. Then came June 1783. While attending a militia muster near Price's Fork in Montgomery County, Preston collapsed. Official accounts say it was heat or stroke, but the land whispered other possibilities. The burden of war, of conflicting ideals, of sustaining a vast plantation empire, all weighed him down. He died. The man who crossed frontiers, claimed lands, fought battles, and built dynasties, fell away from the house he built, but his lineage endured. His plantation passed to his wife Susanna, then to his children. Smithfield remained a seat of power even as the country changed around it. The fractures, however, never healed. The paradox of a man who spoke of liberty while owning slaves haunted his descendants. The fields whispered, the cabins remembered. The land never forgot the cost. When you walk through Smithfield today, the walls are silent. The manuscripts, the ledgers, the maps lie dusted. But beneath the stillness, echoes remain of conflicts fought, promises broken, and power built on pain. The air grows thick with history. The walls of Smithfield stand quiet, worn by centuries of wind and memory. The estate never became empty. It lived on in bloodlines, in politics, in the destinies of land and people. The story did not end with Colonel Preston's death. It fractured, echoed, and regenerated. After Preston died in 1783 at a militia muster near Price's Fork, his home and holdings passed to his wife, Susanna Smith Preston. She remained at Smithfield for more than 40 years. Her stewardship preserved the estate not just as land, but as the heart of a legacy. Their children inherited more than property. They inherited power, expectation, and the burden of their father's contradictions. William and Susanna had 12 children. Among them was James Patton Preston, who became governor of Virginia from 1816 to 1819. Their grandson, William Ballard Preston, served as a U.S. congressman and Virginia's Secretary of the Navy, and later played a role in the Confederacy. The mansion of Smithfield stood as a symbol. Built between 1772 and 1774, it was both home and monument. Its architecture, with high ceilings and refined rooms, was meant to impress guests with wealth and power. Yet even as the Prestons expanded, the land remembered. The fields held footprints of those who labored. The slave cabins, long vanished, left imprints in soil and story. The graves of both Prestons and enslaved people lie side by side near the plantation grounds. In the 19th century, as America fractured over slavery and union, the Preston name remained prominent. They aligned often with Southern interests. Smithfield's heritage became entangled with the politics of secession and memory. Legacy, however, is haunted. Descendants sold parts of the plantations, and the land gradually changed hands. The historical narrative sanitized the cost. The names of slaves were rarely mentioned, their suffering glossed over. Smithfield remained in the family until 1959, when Janie Preston Bower Lamb, a great-great-granddaughter, donated it to the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, transforming it into a museum. In museum corridors, visitors see portraits of noble Prestons, documents of founding, maps of expansion, but they rarely see the ledger sheets listing enslaved people, or the tools left behind, or the soil bearing unmarked graves. The silence is intentional, yet historians and descendants have worked to recover those voices. The stories of those enslaved at Smithfield are resurfacing, tracing families, mapping journeys, and recognizing that 16 enslaved Africans purchased in 1759 laid the foundation for decades of forced labor and quiet resistance. Greenfield, Preston's earlier plantation, burned and lost its main house long ago. Only a few outbuildings remain. Yet even in its ruins, the memory speaks of ownership and the lives it consumed. Today, Smithfield stands as a historic museum on the National Register of Historic Places. Its restoration preserved grand rooms and hidden spaces beneath. The museum now tells the full history of colonists, of the Prestons, and of the enslaved community. But for every exhibit, there remains a gap. The absence of names unrecorded, the absence of children torn apart, the absence of grief and defiance. The plantation, once a private domain, now bears witness. On warm evenings, visitors walk the grounds. Some stop by the cemetery, reading names and dates. Some pause at the shadows of the garden. Some wonder how many lives passed unnoticed, how many dreams were buried. History is a house built on many foundations. The Prestons built theirs on stone, on laws, on pride. But beneath it lies earth stained with toil and sorrow. Beneath, the bones of the enslaved remained uncounted, unnamed, uncelebrated. Their ghosts live in the wind that courses through the fields, in the cracks of the walls, in the hush between a guide's words and the echo of a visitor's steps. Time hushed. Centuries passed. The walls of Smithfield stood. The fields stretched beyond sight. The name Preston lived on in archives, in maps, in the textbooks of Virginia. But history is never silent. It calls across the years, demanding to be heard. In 1959, Janie Preston Bower Lamb, a descendant of Colonel William Preston, donated Smithfield to the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities. The house became a museum. Its purpose shifted from private seat of power to public keeper of stories. But the early exhibits were cautious. The narrative favored architecture, lineage, and ambition. The lives of the enslaved were brief mentions. The silence continued. Only in recent decades have the voices of the enslaved families from Smithfield begun to emerge. Historians have traced their lives, their endurance, and their legacy beyond 1865. Today, historic Smithfield acknowledges this truth. Its mission now centers on telling the stories of everyone who lived there, the Prestons and the enslaved community. It recognizes that its beauty was built on injustice. Visitors step into rooms once filled with power. They walk gardens shaped by enslaved hands. They move through basement exhibits holding fragments of daily life. In every corner there is an invitation to remember, to face what was hidden. The land itself remembers. Smithfield is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and the Virginia Landmarks Register. It stands under preservation by Virginia Tech and the foundation that manages it. Public records describe it as the home of William Preston, surveyor, politician, and Revolutionary War officer who opened much of the region to settlement. But those same grounds hold deeper truths, the scars of lives enslaved and forgotten. To remember Colonel William Preston is to face contradiction. He was a builder, a fighter, a leader. He shaped borders and built a dynasty. But his rise stood on the labor of people denied their own freedom. Their names were not recorded, but their presence shaped everything he built. The haunting remains, in local stories, in family memories, in the quiet air of Smithfield. One question endures: who built this legacy? Who carried the weight? Who was erased? Some want to honor the grandeur, others demand truth. The reckoning lies between both. Justice begins with acknowledgement, naming the forgotten, preserving their stories, giving voice to those who had none. The Preston descendants shaped much of Virginia's history. Their name is tied to institutions like Virginia Tech, whose land borders historic Smithfield. The name still carries weight, but memory must now share the space with those whose labor built it. Today, Smithfield's keepers host research, restoration, and programs that center descendant stories. They are rebuilding not the walls, but the truth itself. And for those who walk its halls in silence, the echo remains. The land remembers the footsteps of the enslaved. The walls remember the unsung voices. The dust remembers the tears. Colonel William Preston's story is not only history, it is a warning. Power built on silence will always return. A legacy that erases others leaves a wound. The only way forward is to listen to the faint echoes, to the buried fragments, and to those who still carry memory in their blood. If you stand on the rolling hills near Blacksburg at dusk, listen. The air moves through broken shutters. The floorboards creak as if under unseen steps. The house may be quiet now, but memory is not dead. It waits, it remembers, it endures.